Big weekend upcoming for BYU on the recruiting front as they will be welcoming in 4 high-level prospects. We talked about this on the Tuesday edition of the show, but excited to welcome in a guy who's a foremost authority on this. That's John Garcia from Sports Illustrated. Going to catch up with him and talk about what to expect from guys like Walker Lyons, Jackson Bowers, Hunter Clegg, and or Ethan Thomason. Got all that and more on today's edition of Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Hope you guys are all doing fantastic out there, and very excited to welcome in our special guest today, John Garcia from Sports Illustrated, a national recruiting authority, but also an insider here for us on the college channel of the Locked On Podcast Network. John, thank you so much for making some time for us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. You know, it's a great time of year. A lot of people loading up for huge June official visits. It means that these lists are getting cut and decisions are on the way. So always a good time of year to reconnect for sure.
Okay, I want to start there, actually, if you don't mind. Why is there so much more emphasis on these official visits in the summer suddenly? Like, why are all these guys pushing for these official visits this time of year?
I think it's working from both the program and the prospect perspective here, Jake. You know, certainly from a program perspective, you're like, hey, there's a limited number of spots. Roster management for all these coaches right now is nuts, right? The transfer portal, NIL, extra year of eligibility dating back to 2020. Trying to figure out how to navigate that is really hard. So the sooner you understand, hey, this is how many spots we have, and this is how many that could be flexible. Let's figure it out a little sooner, a little earlier, if at all possible. So you understand the April visits around spring practices and the spring games. And then, of course, the June visits, which are really intimate opportunities for the coaches as well. There's no spring practice going on. There's no game planning. You know, if you visit during the season, there's only so much time these coaches can give to recruiting. So I do think the June window opens it up for pretty much however the program sees fit, because there's not something that has to be going on that is going on at that moment. And then from the player's perspective, look, same deal. From a business perspective, you want to take a spot. If you're not, you know, a Walker Lyons who can wait and take his time, and wherever he goes, everyone's going to say, hey, whenever you want to commit, that's cool. That's not the case for most prospects. There's a bit of a window here to latch onto a spot for those same reasons we talked about: roster management, eligibility. Everybody's trying to figure out where their numbers are, and that affects recruiting basically every single day. So I think from a business perspective, prospects want to get that done sooner. And then on the other side of it, from a personal and just football perspective, they want to make a decision before the senior season begins. It's just kind of become a big window to say, hey, I'm going to focus on recruiting in the offseason. I'm going to make a commitment, and then boom, let's go chase a state championship. You know, that's become a very popular window for recruits to make decisions, just from a personal and logistical perspective as well.
With BYU and their success the past 2 years, they've won 21 games over the past 2 years. We all know about the Zach Wilson story, what they did last year, winning 10 games. You obviously are based over in Florida, so you have more of a national perspective on this, but how much of an uptick have you seen BYU get in terms of just their overall profile as a recruiting power, I guess I would ask?
Yeah, it's certainly risen. I think it's pretty tangible to see. We're seeing them go outside of that, what do we call it, Pac-12, Big 12 footprint, recruiting-wise, going into Texas more, going into the Southeast more. I mean, they've got to commit from Alabama this cycle. Down in Florida, we hear more offers coming in for BYU. So I just think everyone recognizes that program, when you look at it historically, can contend with a lot of major, you know, blue bloods, what have you. But it's now starting to trickle down into recruiting where those kids now understand, hey, I can play on national television. It's such a unique program. And then, of course, eventually getting into the Big 12, validates that sort of Power 5 status that, for us doesn't matter. But when you talk about recruits, man, it really matters. It's a validator. Like either I'm an FBS recruit or I'm a Power 5 recruit. And once they get to that threshold, it holds more weight. So programs that have a lot of winning attached to it as well, like a BYU, it all of a sudden starts to bubble up at the right time. So I think that's going to continue for the Cougars. I think that footprint will continue to stretch. And for a program like that, in my mind, that is a recipe for success. It's the footprint locally is good, not elite. So you have to always dip out of there as much as you can. And I think winning Power 5, all that stuff will push towards more kids at least being aware of what BYU is doing and consider them when they do start to, earn that interest and eventually that offer.
One more kind of big picture question for you, though. BYU is getting ready to go into the Big 12 here. How much do you think BYU needs to do in terms of preparation going into the Big 12? And also, how much will I guess a two-parter here, how much will the Big 12 help them in terms of their overall ability to recruit?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a validator when you're in the Power 5. I mean, I think BYU is one of these programs before where you look at it and you say it's a Power 5 offer, even though technically it wasn't. It's like Notre Dame. Like, what is that? Is that Power 5 or not? Of course it is. So we've put BYU kind of unofficially in that category, but for them, I think it'll be nice to officially put them in that category. I think that will create a lot more validation for their ability to recruit again nationally. And you think of the Big 12 footprint, it is literally going to be the widest of the Power 5 conferences. You're going to go all the way up to Utah, all the way across to West Virginia, down into Florida, and of course, west to Texas. And I think that makes it such an interesting footprint to start to at least attempt to build a little bit more from a recruiting perspective. You might be more inclined if you're Kalani Sitake to, what, let me offer this kid in Atlanta. We maybe wouldn't have had a shot 2 years ago, but the position he plays, the trajectory of our program now going into the Big 12, it's something that is a little easier to resonate towards that recruit with. So I think that stuff all goes together. It really does help, even though, again, for folks like you and me, we've always viewed BYU there. But again, this is recruiting. I always remind folks, these are 16, 17-year-olds that don't, they don't remember. They think Steve Young's just this analyst on ESPN, right? So you have to kind of remind yourself of that, because we keep covering recruiting, but they're the same age always. So they don't have that same, knowledge base that we do. So again, that official Power 5 Big 12 validator will play importantly in recruiting.
I will never forget. I actually had a young man tell me once upon a time, I didn't know that Steve Young played at BYU till I got to BYU.
You see? It's amazing, but it makes sense, right? It makes sense for them. That is a back in the day recruit or back in the day player, which, is crazy to say out loud for us, but it is true.
Anything a decade old is like dinosaur for most of these young men. So it's absolutely crazy. All right. More with John here in a moment. John, where can people find you on Twitter? I put it down there. Yeah. John Garcia _Jr on Twitter. You can check out his work. Make sure you follow this show, Locked On Cougars, wherever you get your podcast. More with John here in a moment. First, though, a word on our friends over at Intercap Lending. There's a reason that no lender helps more families in the state of Utah with their mortgage needs than our friends at Intercap Lending. The reason? Intercap, they get deals done. They feature a quick and simple process. They close loans 2 weeks faster than the industry average. And although fast is great, the ultimate goal is to help create a stress-free home loan process for you, the buyer. Any of you know right now with the interest rates going up, now is the time to capitalize if you're going to do that. And that is what Locked On's personal loan officer, Intercap Lending, Steve Carter, has been delivering to hundreds of Locked On listeners, including Locked On founder David Locke. And let's be real, if David can keep if David can stay on track with Steve Carter's help, anybody can be helped by Intercap Lending and Steve Carter. So reach out anytime, whatever you need with regards to your mortgage, a new mortgage, refinancing, cash out. You're just trying to get a better interest rate or lower the number of years. They can help you guys out. They've got 44 years of experience behind them. And the best part is, even though they're based in Utah, they're capable of helping anybody up and down the Wasatch Front, in addition to 40 states nationwide. So give them a shot. Reach out to Steve directly. His number, 385-800-8528. You will not find a more responsive loan officer. I can promise you that. I've met with Steve myself. Once again, his phone number, 385-800-8528. Go online to intercaplending.com to learn more, or reach out to us, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. Happy to broker a conversation between you as well. That's Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. Intercap Lending is an equal housing lender. All right, more now with Steve Carter, but a reminder that we have an important favor for all of you to do for us. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcast. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes a survey qualifies for a chance to win one of 10 100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, to go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you for your help, and thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, more with John Garcia now. And John, I want to get more into the nitty-gritty. A huge weekend upcoming for BYU on the recruiting front. Walker Lyons, Jackson Bowers, Hunter Clegg, and Ethan Thomason all going to be on campus for BYU. There might be a few other players that come in. We're still waiting to hear word on that. But those four alone, three four-star prospects, and Ethan Thomason's kind of knocking on that door, depending on which service you look at, of that four-star territory. How big of a weekend do you think this is for the BYU football program?
It's massive, Jake. I think, you're not going to say no to any of those four when they say, hey, hey, coach, I want to set up an official to BYU. You're like, okay, great, let's do it. But I think the ability to put them together, I think just makes it so much more because for one, I mean, in terms of Bowers and Lyons, these are two tight ends. So I think that dynamic sitting in together maybe with the offensive staff and the tight ends coach could be really interesting and maybe even revealing from the BYU perspective. But a lot of these guys are from the same region and they appear to have crossed paths, similar top group of schools that they're looking at as well. So developing a little bit of potential camaraderie between those guys, if they were to end up at a school like BYU together, is never a bad thing. Stranger things have happened on the recruiting trail, but even individually, these are four big-time recruits. As you mentioned, all the other suitors are Power 5 for these guys. A lot of them are heavy-hitting blue blood type of programs that are after them that BYU needs to overcome. So for all of them, getting the first official visit, I think, is really critical. I mean, this is going to be the table setter. This is going to set the bar for how all four of these guys view official visits in general. And they've all got other officials scheduled, and most of them have it, the following weekend. So immediately you're going to get a bump for BYU, and then you're going to get that comparison the following week for all of these guys. So I think that's so critical in terms of positioning yourself for official visits, because you want them early because kids want them early, absolutely. But getting the first one in particular has about as many benefits as any positioning that you could come up with. So I think BYU's got a lot of opportunity this weekend with those four on campus.
I talked to somebody and they actually said, well, isn't this a bad thing? Don't you want to be the last team to go with this? And I said that there are benefits on both sides of that. I am actually of the opinion, I'm with you, John, kind of getting to set the table and really set kind of the bar of where they should be setting their expectations for future official visits in many ways is an advantage, especially in BYU's case. Where do you stand?
I think the front end is better. I think there's a lot of kids and a lot of these guys we're talking about, they have a lot of visits coming up back to back to back to back. I've been told by dozens of kids that it gets really exhausting, even though you're wined and dined at all of these campuses. When you start to line them up one after the other, it really does start to slow you down, and it does blur again. Like, these are young kids that have never really done anything like this, right? Being courted over social media or text or FaceTime is one thing. Being there for 48 hours in person, it's intense. It's a bit draining, right? It's like the first day you go on vacation and you relax, you're kind of tired, right? Imagine that 4 weekends in a row from millionaire coaches and programs that have all the resources in the world, right? You start to build a little bit of that exhaustion, even though it's exciting and unique. The first one, that first impression, the first 5-star hotel, whatever it is, that stuff really does matter in recruiting. And again, I think when you start to take multiple trips, there's some recency bias with the last visit, maybe ahead of a decision. You certainly understand that angle, but there's a fatigue and a little bit of luster that's lost when it's so much in such a small amount of time. And a lot of these kids are going to be going through that. So I would pick to go first if I had to draft, which weekend I would want with a given recruit. I'd want to go first almost every single time, unless I knew the kid was going to wait and he's going to take officials in the fall. In that case, you maybe want to slow down, but these guys look like they're going to accelerate the process and get closer to a decision here soon. So I'd certainly want to be just about where BYU is with these four.
Is there I don't know how to ask this question, because you cover recruiting at a national level, so you hear about all these official visits so many times. Is there a common theme, or like almost a secret weapon that successful programs have with regards to their official visits that you've noticed?
I think it's different depending on the school. I think certain situations that can be created by these coaches and creative departments can put things over the top. But then I think a lot of times it just comes down to the people. I know, looking at some of the schools that we hear from the most, like in Alabama, for instance, they always eat breakfast at Saban's house on Sunday morning, right? Either right before or after church. So it's like that has a personal touch to it, to where you've been battered with X's and O's and football and facilities and weight room and all this in your face intense stuff. But then there's like a peeled back layer, I should say, of sitting down with a coach eating, some biscuits on a Sunday morning. So I think every school has kind of their own unique thing that they sell on official visits. And I think it could be changing relative to the time of year. So in this case, like for BYU, maybe there's something that is only prevalent in the month of June that they can foster during these official visit weekends. And we see more outside the box stuff coming as time goes along. I know, like at Georgia 2 weekends ago, they did like a scavenger hunt, where they're looking for Kirby Smart. I mean, sometimes it's the simplest kind of just something that creates a human to human connection that could really resonate with the recruit. But some kids are old school. Some kids, quarterbacks, offensive linemen, corners, they want to get in the film room and they really want to sit down with you. And this allows for more time to really dig into things like that. So it goes back to kind of the classic principles of recruiting, like figure out who the decision maker is around the recruit and focus on that person. And then with the recruit specifically, what makes him tick, right? What is his thing? If he's an X's and O's guy, line that up for the visit, do your homework there. And I think you can, go further into the recruitment. But normally it's non-football things that resonate the most with recruits. And obviously at BYU, I mean, my gosh, it's as gorgeous there as it is anywhere. I think you can sell a lot of the non-football element of this process.
Well, for years, BYU did a lot of their official visits in the winter, and they'd go snowmobiling. That was kind of the hallmark of a lot of BYU's visits. Well, now with it being June, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, you can't really do snow machines, but you can take like the razors, the side-by-sides, and go up in the Wasatch Mountains up here. So we'll see what comes out of this. I am interested to see how they kind of shift the dynamic in terms of having it during the summer versus it being in the dead of winter, as they've done previously. Should be very interesting in that front. All right, John, last thing I want to talk to you about is just about these individual players themselves, kind of rapid fire, get your take on them. But first, I need to get a word in on our friends over at BetOnline. They are our partners here on Locked On Cougars, and they continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, for including this year's basketball playoffs with the NBA Finals, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures odds now. It's all at betonline.net, as they are your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting, the playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action available to you now. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we are obviously here on YouTube doing this live, but also on the various podcast providers out there. John, if you don't mind, I do this with every one of my guests. Down in the right corner, so if you'll point down to the right corner for me, so opposite of where I'm at, there's a little button there that says, hey, follow for more shows. Subscribe to the show. Leave us a comment, like it. Let us know what you guys like about this and your takes on all things on these shows. And a huge thank you for your support in that venture. And also make sure to leave us ratings and reviews if you're able to on your podcast provider. All right. Before we wrap up here with John, I wanted to run through the different prospects that BYU's got coming in. We'll start off with, I think, the most highly rated of the bunch. That is Walker Lyons from Folsom High School in Folsom, California. John, kind of give me your take on Walker. You mentioned earlier on in today's show that he's a guy that he could wait until February if he wanted to, and anybody who wants him will wait and take his signature at that point. What do you make of this young man?
This is just a dynamic, modern 2022 kind of tight end. One that you're going to see split out as much as you'll see him attached. He'll be in the slot. He'll move around and really challenge you, athletically as a wide receiver would. But of course, he's, 6'5", 6'6", 230 pounds. So he has the physicality behind it of a tight end. So just that matchup nightmare that this position has become synonymous for at the highest of levels. And I think he embodies that from a dynamic perspective, incredibly productive at the high school level. And again, just polished, right? You see it, he catches the ball away from his body. He's very, smooth with his cuts for a guy that size. And he can really, put a route combination together, which is not easy to do with his frame. So that's why he's so coveted coast to coast. And that's why it's such a battle for his recruitment. But as I'm sure your audience knows, he's got a lot of ties to BYU. I think his sister goes there right now even. So there's just a lot for BYU in this race. And I think you need to win one of these, right? There has to be a plant flagging recruiting victory in this class of 2023. And gosh, I mean, Lyons would be that guy for BYU. Just one of those reminders like, hey, the Cougars are here to go and can contend for some of these big name recruits that everybody wants. So those are always, you need to win all the other battles too. But when you win head to head with prospects that really have an opportunity to play almost anywhere, it carries more weight, at the top of your commitment list. So, I think BYU's got a great shot at him. And I think he'd be one of those, again, flag planting type of recruits where you say, I remember this recruitment 5 years from now, and it started this at BYU, or it changed this perception about where BYU could go and who they can compete with for top talent.
Yeah, and if they didn't get Walker Lyons, Jackson Bowers is no slouch in his own right. Out of Arizona, he's actually from one of the quote-unquote bastions that BYU's recruited for many, many years at Mountain View down there in the Phoenix area. And what do you make of Jackson Bowers? How does he compare and contrast with a guy like Walker Lyons?
That's a great question. I think production-wise, he's right there. I mean, this guy averaged like 18 yards a catch last year, which is really hard to do when you're a big, power forward-looking tight end like Bowers is. But his game is different to me. He's a little bit more classic. You're going to line him up, hand in the dirt. You're going to let him block a lot more than you would with Lyons. And I think he's a little bit more raw as a pass catcher relative to Walker, just in terms of route running and things like that. But in terms of, making plays on the football, he's right there. I mean, ultra productive, a big physical guy. He wins at the catch point, some good sideline work and body control examples throughout his tape as well. So I think if you're looking for a more balanced tight end who can help you in the run game as well, I think he's probably higher on your board than a Walker Lyons, who's a little bit more finesse, a little bit more dynamic in space, and a jumbo wide receiver, if you will. But, Bowers has some classic tight end in him. And, BYU's obviously utilized that position well, over my lifetime. And you have an argument for both in this day and age, right? And I don't know Kalani Sitake personally, but I do know that he would not say no to both of these recruits if they were like on Sunday, like, hey, coach, I'm ready to be a Cougar. You can complement each other with these two. And I think that's the broader picture here. And then selling them that together is going to be so interesting. That's why I said I would love to be in that room to see how the time is distributed and how the attention is distributed in having them visit together. Interesting strategy. And it could be a breakthrough strategy if it works for the Cougars. But yeah, both of those are among, the 5 to 10 best tight ends in the country for a reason.
Well, and many of the longtime BYU fans who are watching or listening to this will remember Chad Lewis and Atula Mealy being tandem together. You remember Andrew George, Dennis Pitt. Some of the greatest eras of BYU football have had two tight ends that actually complement each other. So that may be one of the selling points BYU throws at both of these guys, saying, hey, you have styles that work together, and you also are so different. We can work with you guys and have you both on the field at the same time. And could work out. We'll see what happens there. I want to stick with the offense here for a moment and talk about Ethan Thomason, a mammoth of an offensive lineman, 6'8", seemingly just a complete blank slate with regards to his frame and the ability to put good weight on there. What do you make of this young man out of Colorado?
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, 6'8", my goodness, over 300 pounds already. Decent basketball player too. So you like some of the footwork foundation that that he's gaining and cross-training with on the hardwood, but this is an offensive tackle that is pretty much created from scratch, right? A guy who's extremely long, but he's got a lot of aggression to him as well. He's not a finesse player by any stretch of the imagination. He's comfortable pass blocking already, which is a big deal in high school football. Being a little bit comfortable there as a high school junior, I think says a lot about where Thomason's game is and where it could go going forward. As you said, Jake, you're definitely going to add weight to him. You want him to play a little bit lower, which is probably something he hears every day because he's 6'8", just kind of a natural deal there. But you watch him and you understand, the punch is good. The extension is elite there. You understand why a lot of Pac-12, Big 12 schools are clamoring for this kid. And again, BYU is getting the first official visit, and that really does say a lot at this stage of the game. And especially for a kid like that who's got, I think he's got a top 8.
Yeah.
Only a few officials set, right? So we're kind of just being an industry veteran. You're like, okay, it's not really a top 8, is it? Right?
Yeah.
You could start to eliminate some schools that are out on the outside looking in for those official visits. Obviously, BYU will not be one of those. So that's great news for the Cougars. And yeah, I mean, another position that you kind of know what you're getting at BYU, which as I think is a really good thing in terms of a selling point.
All right, and then the lone defensive player in this bunch is Hunter Clegg. I've had a chance to call some of his high school games at American Fork in BYU's proverbial backyard, literally minutes away from BYU's campus, but he seems like he's got limitless potential as a defensive end prospect. What do you make of him?
Yeah, real twitchy. I mean, you watch him come off the ball, and American Fork's a great program, obviously. You watch him come off the ball. He's the first guy off at 6'4", 225 or whatever he's listed at, and that's really impressive off the edge. Another very productive player, kind of a theme in looking at some of these BYU targets. They're banking on what you can do now and what you may be able to do, not just what you may be able to do down the line, which is something I like from a program's evaluation strategy. But yeah, this kid's crazy off the edge. And he's got a lot of ability underneath as well. I think he can set the edge. He can play at the point of attack. So as he does that more going forward and builds onto that frame a little bit, I think positionally he will be really interesting, right? He could very well remain on the edge, true stand-up guy because he's athletic enough to do it, but you could also see him bulking up and maybe turning into a hybrid down the line. So that one's interesting from a physical and ceiling perspective. And then his recruitment, I mean, this American Fork kid, I mean, this is a holy war kind of kid, right? I mean, this is a BYU, Utah, this is a bloody knuckled recruiting, target for both of these programs. It feels like Utah certainly had some buzz early on. Now BYU's getting this first OV. So it becomes a little bit more of a coin toss as time goes on here. So, BYU is, I mean, you got to look across the state, right? I mean, that's something that is always prevalent, and it'll probably become more prevalent now, with the Big 12 distinction, because it's two different Power 5 conferences that you're selling at this point. So that will be fascinating, right? Looking at some of these, that might have just been a recruiting story for me to drum up there to my editors. Like, hey, I need to look at the new Big 12 schools and how their recruiting will change in state for them. I think this changes a lot for BYU and helps them contend even more so than they already do, because of course, the roster's littered with in-state recruits. And this one, the same thing for Utah, right? This one will be one of those measuring stick kind of battles that's much more regional, but it doesn't lessen the value and importance of it when all's said and done.
And that's the thing about it. You have now the Pac-12 and the Big 12 separated by 40 minutes in the state of Utah.
Amazing.
So it's crazy. John, thank you so much for taking some time with us here on Locked On Cougars. You can find his work down there, John Garcia _Jr. Read him at Sports Illustrated, obviously one of our insiders here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again, John.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
There you go, John Garcia from Sports Illustrated. More tomorrow on what's going on with BYU and everything else going on with the Cougars. We'll have you covered on that front. We also will continue to catch up on our top 50 player countdown. We've not been very consistent. I apologize for that, but we will have you guys covered on that. We'll catch up on that tomorrow's edition of the show. And we also got to talk about a new list of the big board from Mel Kiper. 4 Cougars on that list. What to make of each 4 of them and where they stand with regards to the NFL draft next year. Got all that and more on a new edition of Locked On Cougars tomorrow. Make sure you make your second listen today. Our friends over at Locked On Big 12. Josh Neighbors and the crew do an incredible job. I will be part of the roundtable this week. So hope you guys will be joining us for that. And until then, have a great rest of your day. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast for May. June. It's June 1. Holy smokes. It's a new month. June 1st, 2022. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. See ya.